Well, we can tell you tonight that an SABC journalist has been receiving warnings to be careful around apartheid-era exposés. And of course, for years, the SABC has been investigating claims, some involving apartheid ministers, but mostly the focus on a convicted pedophile, Gert Van Rooyen. We spoke to Alet Van Rensburg-Wright last week. You spoke to Bongani. Let's catch up with her, the executive producer of Fokus, the current affairs program on the SABC. Thank you for being with us. So you've been doing an investigation linked to Gert Van Rooyen, looking at those bodies. We'll get into that, and of course it has a link to apartheid ministers. But firstly, tell us about the warnings that you've received.
People who were very close and have been very close to the whole Van Rooyen investigation, well, over a period of time have warned me to be very careful, but in the last week, specifically, I've been told to just watch my back and my front and to be very careful. These are people who've also had threats over the years, so I haven't really had a threat. We'll see.
Can you name anybody you believe to be involved at all?
Don't know. It's very difficult, and I also
So it's more friends saying, look, we think somebody is out to...
We've been through it and we're involved also. We're close to the investigation and the things, be careful.
Are you feeling scared?
No.
Not at all?
No, not at all. I would like the truth to come out because on the one hand, you know, serious allegations have been made. They've never been investigated in a period of 30 years, except for Mark Minnie. And if you think about it, that was actually an unauthorized investigation if you read the book. And he was pulled off the investigation so nothing has really been official. There's never been a proper investigation in 30 years, which I find very strange. At the same time...
The Hawk's saying it will investigate if there's enough evidence. What do you make of that?
Well, I hope they do, because these are serious allegations, and if they're true, there are victims out there or families who've lost children. And I think these families need answers, and I think these children also need to be honored in the way that for example, the missing 6 children in the Van Rooyen case have been almost honored over the last 30 years. At the same time, if these allegations are not true, don't you think we owe it to the people who are being accused that the truth comes out? But I must say I find it very strange that no one has asked for an investigation over 30 years.
Okay, so we're going to look at your investigations, but first, The Lost Boys, this book and the author, the co-author you're referring to, an ex-policeman, Mark Minnie. Police now saying a suicide note was found, but the gun wasn't his. So many questions here. Do you have questions?
Yes, I do. If you see what people who are close to him say, who've been talking to him over the last few days, they say he has found new witnesses and that he spoke to some last week, especially Netwerk 24. That journalist has done a lot of work, and she said that he was going to meet with more witnesses this week, so it's strange. It's very difficult to say we'll have to wait for the investigation. I just hope and pray that this is going to be a thorough investigation, because we all know from the past and what came out during the period of the Truth Commission, the TRC, you know, how investigations, even commissions of inquiry, were sometimes actually used as cover-ups. And I really, really hope in this case that this will be a thorough investigation and that we can believe and trust the outcome of the investigation.
I think you're referring to the same thing. Marianne Tam, who wrote the foreword to this book and was involved in editing, said that Mark Minnie feared for his life. He was concerned, told her. And there was another investigation on the cards into a unit that stages suicides.
Yes. So, and as I say, you know, if you look over the years, how many people have died, I know there was a man, I'd rather not mention his name, many years ago during one of these investigations into the alleged apartheid atrocities. I spoke to a guy who was a former security type of person, and then he committed suicide, they said. And I found it very strange. And when I finally found the policeman who was investigating his case, he said to me that he's ruling it as suicide, but he knows it was murder. For example, he said the guy was right-handed, but he was shot through the left-handed, you know.
Which seems pretty obvious.
Yes, and he said to me that he's got so many cases, and he can see this as a state, the links to the state, and he's never going to solve this murder, so he'll rule it as suicide.
We don't want to be involved in any conspiracy theories. I mean, like you say, there just needs to be a full investigation here. But you have pointed to the fact that Mark Minnie himself, because he was there at the time, he would be crucial to any investigation.
And I find that extremely worrying, because a lot of the things you read is hearsay. But if you read the book, what Mark Minnie had to say was first-hand experience. He said he met with 2 victims in the hospital, the 2 brothers. He spoke to the victims, and some of the victims himself. He had first-hand experience of what the claims were. So, you know, he would have been the one that would have been crucial in any investigation, and now he's dead.
All right, so let's just look at the book. So it claims there was a paedophile ring involving Minister Magnus Malan, other ministers. These are not new claims. Chris Barron, after Magnus Malan's death, wrote about the 2 boys who had apparently been sexually assaulted on Bird Island, where they were taken for these fishing trips. You have focused on something else, Gert Van Rooyen, the paedophile, his victims. He was also a serial killer. But first, explain the link between them.
Well, it's interesting that these allegations have been made, and you know that there were National Party ministers who had a meeting with Gert Van Rooyen, and there was also a witness, and that was his son Flippy, who claimed that he was there when his father met 8 men, and 3 were National Party ministers, and he names them. And one name is the same as the Bird Island names, but the other 2 are different names. So we're looking in total at 5 names that have been mentioned. Now Flippy then, because he made contradictory statements about what happened to the girls, he was convicted and he was and sentenced for perjury, which you know, unfortunately makes him a witness who can't, you know, is not credible. But at the same time, I can also say that I find it very strange that his parole was extended.
All right, so this is old claims by his son. He was speaking to the SABC decades ago, mentioning a time where he saw his son with these apartheid ministers. So let's just look at the names that are out there. Magnus Malan, another cabinet minister, John Wiley, also committed suicide, Dave Allen, a businessman. So you're saying there are 2 more names mentioned by Gert Van Rooyen's son?
3 more ministers.
3 more ministers, but one is overlapping.
No, one is, there was the businessman, but yes, there's one, no, yes, it's 2 more names.
2 more names. So, and can we mention those names?
I'd rather not mention it at this stage. I feel there should be a proper investigation, because if these allegations are not true, you know, let's rather have a proper, but I really hope there's going to be an investigation. It's going to be very difficult now, because as I say, you know, one of the main witnesses is now dead.
Yeah. Tell us more. So secret meetings, I guess it just looks so bad. You have a paedophile alleged to have buried the bodies of young female victims meeting apartheid ministers. So there's this link that needs to be looked at.
And Flippy, his son, claimed that on the way to this Bushveld farm where they had the meeting, his father said to him that these important friends of his didn't want him to bring anyone with, you know, along to this meeting, but he decided to bring his son. He said he didn't want to go alone. He also said to his son that I'm involved in something that I can't get out. I can't get out of this. He also said that if he tried to get out of this thing, he'd be killed. Gert Van Rooyen said this. And that he was basically scared of these people, and that it involved the children, or some of the children, because I still believe there were more than 6 children. And from my investigations and some of the affidavits that I've seen over the years, unfortunately a lot of these witnesses were not credible witnesses, because a lot of them are career criminals. But there's always reference to other people and other children, descriptions of other children. And if you think about it, Flippy also mentioned that his father got into trouble the day he decided to steal children with parents, which makes you wonder if there were more children who were who had parents who wouldn't care, or street children. And I'm pretty convinced it was part of a network, that there's a paedophile network. There was, and possibly still is, because a lot of people have, over the past 2 years, contacted me as well about the fact that there still is, well, there's at least one network, more than one, most probably, that's still operating and taking children.
And what's scary, I mean, if people are giving you warnings, it suggests that there are people out there who think that apartheid era crimes were okay, and in fact, anybody threatening to expose them should be suppressed, should be killed even.
It's possible, but at the same time, as I say, it seems that a lot of this is still happening. And then it's even beyond apartheid. You know, it's, and I really do believe it should be investigated, and thoroughly. And I also believe that Mark Minnie's death should be investigated thoroughly, that they make sure that whether it's suicide or murder, it's one of the two.
So take us back to the late 80s, early 90s. Gert Van Rooyen, his name linked to these missing girls. Tell us what happened then and how you got involved, how the SABC was involved.
Well, what's very interesting is that Gert Van Rooyen, the first time he got into trouble was in, I think he was still a youngster, as a juvenile. He got into trouble with the law. Then in the early 60s, I think it was about 1961, 62, he was imprisoned for theft, for car, vehicle parts or something. Then in 1979, he was arrested for molesting two young girls, 11 and 13. They were cousins, and at the Hartbeespoort Dam, they were molested. He was caught and he was sent to prison. He was sentenced to 4 years imprisonment, and he was released after 3. And then in the late 80s, the news broke of all these girls who went missing. The first one was in 88, there were 2, and then in the end 6, 88 and 89. And by the end of 89, and I remember that time very clearly how scared parents were, especially parents of little blonde girls with blue eyes, because with the exception of one girl, all of them were blonde with blue eyes. And they were petrified. And I remember these little faces on the milk cartons that if you had breakfast in the morning, you'd see these faces of these missing girls. It was huge. They were rewards for information. And then in January 1990 was when the 7th girl escaped from Gert Van Rooyen's house. And that's when the police linked Gert Van Rooyen to the missing girls. And I mean, at this stage, we still don't know whether they're dead or alive. I mean, they could have been trafficked, they could have been killed. I'm convinced that some of the girls, I don't know if the 6, but some of the girls over the years have been buried, because there are also several references. Flippy said something, there are other affidavits where people claim about children that have been buried also on beaches and places. So I do believe some of the children could be dead, but they could have also, children could have been trafficked out of the country. We don't know, and we don't know how many.
And we don't know because he committed suicide, those bodies never found. But we have been showing visuals of a certain beach there. So now let's fast forward to today and yes, to recently, where you've done an investigation taking you to Blythedale Beach, yes, in KwaZulu-Natal. So how did that start? It started
on a very weird note. I had a phone call from a woman I know, and she actually asked to speak, if I had a number for Susan Piren, who was an investigative journalist, and I gave her the number. I spoke to Susan because she claimed that her grandson, who was only 2 years old, had seen spirits, and she could also see them, and these were the ghosts of the missing, 3 of the missing Van Rooyen girls. I found it very strange, but what triggered me was the fact that a 2-year-old little boy used words such as, "We need to investigate." A 2-year-old doesn't speak like that. He told you about the bad man who brought these girls here. He said all kinds of things about that the bad man beat the girl and beat her until she cried and cried and cried. Now, for a 2-year-old, that's very strange.
Yeah.
And then I started investigating, looking into old cases. I spoke to a lot of people. I spoke to people who were close to Van Rooyen, who were close to Harof. I spoke to policemen who were involved, and then I found that the police had already been to Blythedale, because this is where the family lived, where this little child saw the ghost. That the police were there in the late 90s.
So they lived near Blythedale Beach?
They lived there. They've moved, but they lived there. And I found that the police had been there in the late 90s. They were digging up a property there, because also a medium who told them that she saw the faces of the girls there. And they found nothing in 1999. But what I found even stranger in the town itself was that the people didn't really want to talk about that era. But a woman who's, I don't know, and the woman is sort of the matriarch of the town, she said, but these girls and their spirits have been seen over decades. They know, they're there, they've seen the spirits.
So Fokus goes, SABC does an investigation,
Yes.
digs up part of the beach with officers, but you found nothing. What happens now?
I would like to finish the dig. Because first of all, what I did is I found out exactly what Gert Van Rooyen's movements were. I found out a lot of things about girls being buried on beaches, hard facts, which made it probable that the girls could have been taken there. So I went to the police and they finally agreed to go. But we couldn't finish the dig because first of all, they didn't have the right equipment. There wasn't enough time. And by the time they'd only opened up about the first 5 meters of the pipe, and the pipe must be between 20 and 30 meters long, they stopped because we'd run out of time. And I told them right from the start we could start higher up because the girls are not at the mouth of the pipe, they're higher up. So we've actually not looked where we wanted to look. I'd love to go back if I could find the money to
Why
go
can't
back.
you? So you need the heavy equipment?
Well, the police don't seem keen to go back. I've asked them hundreds of times now and they just don't respond. Over a period of a year, I've made contact several times and they're not responding. So I think if we go back, we'll have to do it and we'll have to do it the right way, and it's going to cost a lot of money. If I could find the money, I'd love to go back. You know, for the sake of the parents, to say to them, no, they're not there. At least now we know they're not there. But we need to find answers. Until we've been, we can't say they're there or they're not there because we haven't finished.
All right, well, we'll follow your investigations if they do resume. This all just points to truth being much stranger than fiction. And of course, we will follow the investigations around Mark Minnie, the co-author of that book. Huge revelations involving apartheid ministers. He's been found killed. Police saying there's no suspicion of foul play. They did find a suicide note, but they are saying that the gun was not his.